Heidi Mike. Thanks for coming to the great event. To start off with, we'll run through what are the whatnots for grant applications. Yeah, and particular funding as well as how to apply for funding, budgeting for funding applications, writing compelling applications to funders, and what happens after submitting your application as well as reporting back to funders. I hope that something valuable comes out of this for the charities or incorporated societies. Firstly, grant funding isn't about money. It's about building and maintaining a relationship that provides funding to you. You are the one telling the story about your mission, vision, and values. The question is, why do you deserve that money compared to other competitors for that grant itself? The relationship mentioned is built from consistent transparency between yourself, governments, foundations, and organisations to support specific projects or activities of your charity or incorporated society, typically for either for the benefit of the community or for research purposes. Unlike loans, grants do not have to be repaid and they do not bear interest. If they're awarded on the merit
Could you step back so you're behind the microphone?
As they're awarded on the merit of the project and its potential benefit to the group or the community of your proposed project. Moreover, grant funding is an obligation that you must deliver on in your application. There is no free lunch. Given Dunedin's opportunities and populations, here's a major list of right here, spanning from gambling trusts to local governments. As a takeaway, gaming and gambling trusts sit on major reserves of cash ready to go to you as long as you provide written documentation and accurate reporting. By law, a lot of these gaming trusts have to retain around 40% of their earnings or greater. So in other words, they've got that money, as I mentioned, to give to you guys. How to find the funders? There's either two pathways. You can go through generosity.org, then there's a potential database full of heaps of funders in there, as well as the ones mentioned, obviously. Secondly, there's FundSorter, which is an AI tool, which obviously filter through your charity or incorporated society and tell you which grant is best for you, as well as how eligible you are for that. How to apply for funding? It consists of three pillars: identifying, eligibility, and preparation. You have to make sure that your project aligns with the grant available, the level of alignment invokes that your charity incorporated society matches the grant in terms of sector, location, and purpose. Secondly, to find out if you're eligible, carefully read the grant criteria to ensure that your organisation and project qualifies. Some grants may require that you must be a registered charity or incorporated society or to operate in that specific area. Most importantly, you have to be able to meet the terms and conditions of the grant. This consists of the project being delivered within a time frame in order to maintain that relationship, as I mentioned prior. Lastly, you have to provide required documents such as financial statements, proof of legal status, project plans, budgets, and letters of support. This requires the project description to be clear by mentioning what you want to do, how you will do it, and who will benefit from the project. Without these, your chance of winning that grant that you want becomes significantly smaller due to a lack of trust within that relationship. And that's what it boils down to at the end of the day, from you and that grant funder. In terms of budgeting, grant funders want to see clear, transparent links between the project's goals and where the grant funding is being spent. Secondly, being realistic. When coming up with a budget for an application, it is important to make sure that you do not over or underestimate the amount of grant funding that you are applying for. Any further grant funding at the end of the funding period must be paid back to the provider, and underestimating the funding application could mean that your project isn't achieved, leaving grant funders disappointed and less likely to continue future funding in that relationship. Lastly, planning for the future. Funders are more fond of projects that can continue to provide good even after receiving the grant. Funders can offer multiple year grants for projects that set out to reach larger goals because of the prior grants you provided due to trust and transparency within the relationship. For example, this is a project budget where obviously that's the reserve that your incorporated society or charity may retain in the sheets, balance sheets for instance, and that's the fund available. For instance, and in order to budget the actual expense, that is really reliant on quotes. So, for instance, this is one of our reports from the community accountant, which was an invoice for the room hire, which was for 152. And obviously, as you can see, given the amount of hours of hiring, that approximates to a cost of $152, as well as many other expenses that are not mentioned here. So that's one example. I'd like to pass it on to Rob. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. So we've heard about, how to find someone to go to and about that alignment. That's a really big, broad talk. There are grant funders that are very specific and niche in what they do, and others that are very broad and happen to hand out all sorts of areas. To kind of overemphasize using those tools. And the one on the left is free. All you need is the library card to give us, and you can get in and you can search. It's narrow by area, narrow by what it is you're doing. And so, of course, once we've identified a funder and we want to make the application, we need to write that compelling application. Compelling is a word that fundraisers use. There's a term, a compelling case, is what professional fundraisers use to describe what we need to do. Why fund us? That's what you need to answer. And you're in control of that. And because it's about you, it's not about them. They've got criteria, and now it's up to you to show them why it will work. And so, knowing your audience, if you're going to an organisation that's about youth sport, make it about youth sport. And that might seem overly obvious, but many organisations do many different things. And the football on a Saturday afternoon, football might not be its purpose. Sport might not be its purpose. Getting people out of the house, getting people engaged, working with youth to improve their lives might be the purpose for you. For that funder, it might be sport, but it's the same activity. But you just need to think through, okay, what's this funder want to hear from me? Don't lie, they don't squeeze. But we can think through what the benefit they want and how that arises from what we do. And we still get to do what we do. It's just we recognise an alternative benefit. And so you're looking at their mission. What are they there for? What is it they want to do? Grassroots, as an example, it's a poultry trust and really keen on sport. If you look at their Facebook page or their stuff online, it's lots of pictures of children and kids. Lots and lots of them. And so what's your best chance of getting funded from them? It's probably to go for kids, for children, if you happen to need those. If it's not, if that's not what you do, then your chances are zero for something. But you can think about that. So if you think, right, well, we've got enough money to pay for the pitch and not enough money to pay for the kit. Or we've got enough money to pay for the kit and not enough for the pitch. What do you go to grassroots for? You go to they want grassroots and go into children's chests and their parents to be running around. So, and then we need to tell a clear story. So why does this matter? It can be very self-evident to us. We go out and we volunteer our time, we're putting in the effort. It's the thing we do. And so we don't need to convince ourselves, but we need to think about why is this an issue to matter? Why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to the funder? But more importantly, why does it matter to the people who are benefiting? What's the benefit they're getting from what you're offering? And then what is your solution? So again, they're looking for solutions. They're not looking for something just to spend money on. And so if you offer up, you pay for the, I saw this one in the application, pay for the photocopy. Now, we ended up funding it because the people around the table agreed. It's just a proxy, isn't it? The photocopying, if we pay for the photocopying, then the money is available for them to do something else with. And we're supporting their ethos. But the funding criteria did not say apply to us for your photocopy. It said apply to us to help make a difference in your community. So your solution probably isn't photocopy, but that doesn't mean you can't put in for the photocopying as long as you link that to the purpose that you're there for. And then who, what, when, where, and how. They want to know what's going on. Oh, are you going to run 3 sessions doing something? Where are you going to? And we need to think of that through, especially because where things happen matters. You know, in Dunedin, we're under Community Trust Otago. There could be people on Zoom coming in from Queenstown, where certain bits around Queenstown Sexualist Trust is there. In other bits, I think when we get down to Kingston, there's yet another trust. And there's a big area in the middle of the Alex that is covered by Otago Materials and St. Mary's Trust. If you're going to do an Alex, you've got twice as many options to trust. So yeah, think that through and lay it down. And again, it can be very evident to us. We're a South Dunedin soup kitchen. So where else are we going to do it? And what else are we going to do? But we need to lay it out so these people aren't doing what we do. And then SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. And in Scotland, we say timeless, we seem to say time bound here. And so, yeah, think those through so that you can be very clear in what you're saying and recognize it. And when we're looking at what we do in results-based accountability, we talk 3 questions. How much will we do? How well will we do it? And the most important one, and the hardest one to show is anyone better off? We can all count. You know, so we ran an event and 25 people came. Was it a good event? 25 people coming, was it 10? We have to start asking questions of the people who come to answer that question. Well, you have to answer people go. Is this a good event? Do they say yes? We know we're running a good event. And then is anyone better off? That's a really big question. It's a hard one to answer. But funders want to fund better off. So we need to think through what is better off in this situation. Is it more connected? Is it fed? You know, it can be that simple. So you can change people's physical states, you can change their skills, knowledge, attitude, behavior. And these are all valid things to recognize. If you get a team together and at the beginning don't function as a team, at the end do function as a team, that's right. And it might have been involved positive. But recognizing that outcome and reflecting what you see in what you do is really important. And when I say that, you know, is anyone better off? Is the environment better off? It's perfectly valid as well. Other things to do. Animals. It's professional but human. Now, reflecting your commitment, you're volunteering probably, you're out there doing this thing, you think it really matters, convey that. You want your voice in this. But simultaneously, we want to recognize that the criteria to meet, there are boxes that need ticked when this arrives, and we still need to tick those boxes. So it's thinking about that balance. And you know, they don't want somebody sort of enthusiastic and flighty. They're not going to give you $10,000 and say, you know, go do something really with that. They're going to come and say, okay, here's $10,000, you need to so you need to convey that. They give you that money, you will look after it and deliver it in the way it should be. And then highlighting those outcomes. So again, that results-based accountability, and some places called outcomes-based accountability. So count it. How much do we do? Do more than count. Those are outputs and they're useful. 100 people came. That's a great number. You run an event and 2,500 people come, brilliant. But talk about a changeable cause and the number of people who will benefit. How did those 100 people come? Those 2,500 people come to your event? How did they benefit from what you did? That's what we need to be talking about. And of course, the challenge is that you may be doing this in advance. You might not run this event. That's why we first started seeking funding for it. So you have to think through And again, there's temper. You don't need to use theory of change. By doing this, we expect that. We need to think that through. Why are we having an event? What is it hoping to achieve from having an event? And then outcomes. That's it. We want to quantify the difference we made. That's what funders want to see. Some funders will be very easy. You go to them and say, well, can you pay for a new site? And say yes. Those funders exist. But if you're wanting 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, you're going to need to start thinking about these things. Every slide is a surprise for me. Right, an example of funding application. So we've used examples from Dunedin Community Accounting. And this community grant under 10,000, I can tell from that, this is a local community trust. Now, does anyone else recognise this layout? Funding applications that have done. Yeah, it's flux, isn't it?
The evil.
Yes, the evil flux. So, Outer Road Gaming Trust use flux, Tyler Community Trust, Central Lakes Trust, Grassroots, DIA. DIA are a big one. They do calls, which are small grants, maybe $5,000, $10,000, relatively easy to get and out. You also do watchers community, watchers facilities for capital assets, and there are various other things that they manage. So you need to get familiar with flux. It's not going anywhere. It seems every month another organization moves to it. So it's not like Portal, you sign in and it steps you through it. Don't try and edit in here. Put it in a Word document or a Google Doc, something backed up online. Edit it, make it perfect, and then paste it in there. It's editing in there, it's in there. And so you can see, we put there project title, financial governance training for nonprofits. What's that? You don't need to say a lot, do you? You know that's what we're doing. And then in the description, we go through and we state this. And so under the topic, even, we started explaining the difference we make. The External Reporting Board has recently issued a new simplified reporting profits. Next, there's a circumstance. We then talk about what arises from that circumstance. It's new things volunteers have to do. So let's help those volunteers do. Can't argue that volunteers don't need to do it. It's a legal requirement. This is an opportunity to make it easier for them. We are going to make it even easier for them. And with what we do, we have the advantage, because we work with nonprofits, so do the funders. So we are able to maybe shortcut some of the stuff that you may not, because they know this is a challenge already at the beginning, whereas you might have to convince them more about what the challenge is. And so we've explained both topics there, and what we'll do, and we've said where it will happen, who it's happening for, and at the very last slide here, so we all know what's understanding the choices. So what will it look like once we've done this? Now that's the state we want to see. We trust that these steps achieve that, and this should be fundable. And it was fundable. It was a money. So we know this is a successful one. And we could have written twice as much. We could have written 3 times as much. We could have brought in some surveys maybe, but we didn't need to. We were concise, but we said what was going to happen. So you don't need to gamble, even though you want to convey all these things. You can still be succinct. Right. So here's where we rambled. And so we started talking about who's going to benefit, what are the numbers that are going to benefit. It's interesting, we could run a seminar and if nobody came, would be no benefit from running that seminar. It's not entirely true because our volunteer students would get some experience of preparing the seminar, but you get the idea. So running a seminar is not enough. How are we going to get people to the seminar? How do we know there's a need for that seminar? And there being 27,000 charities in New Zealand, and the vast majority of them being small, it's one starting point that we can use. But you know from your target audience who they are, and many of them are who haven't reached. Or maybe you're trying to reach more people. Maybe you've never had contact. You're going to go out, find them, show them the benefit of Tai Chi. And again, that's valid. You're causing change by engaging somebody with that activity. And so you can see the questions there. So who will benefit? How this project will make a difference to your wider community and group, and how will you know your projects be successful? The wider community group is particularly interesting. So, okay, you've got your Tai Chi problem, and we get this money, and we manage to find out a Tai Chi master who runs an incredible course, and we all get better at Tai Chi. And that's wonderful. That's great for that group. What is the benefit beyond that group? We set free 25 really invigorated Tai Chi activists into the community with all their calm. Does that help? Does that spread calm elsewhere? They become evangelists for Tai Chi. So what's the benefit for the whole community or the wider community? And so, yeah, we've got this group, we're all dog lovers and we'll do this thing. Actually, what then? How does it reach more people? So we just want to think through these things as we go. You can see here again, this is a replication of that short table we had earlier, the total cost of the project, total funds raised, and that contribution, many organisations want to see it. Maybe they'll fund 80%, maybe they'll fund 50% of the project. So you're going to have to either find another grant to put in or use your own money reserves, or you can always, you might charge entry if it's an event and you balance out with that, or some organisations, DCC is very good at this, there's waste minimisation grants open at the moment, anyone wants to divert some waste, and you can utilise volunteer hours to against their input. I can't remember what the proportion for DCC grants is, maybe something like 75% of the fund. And so you take the number of volunteer hours you're putting in, you take living wage, which is $28.95 now, I think, and you multiply the hours by that number, and that gives you a number that you can balance against it. So you've got a contribution to your whole project. So not all funders do that, but if you're putting in volunteer hours, that's a really good way of not having to use your cash fund and still meet the criteria of meeting the partial funding. Right, and still more questions. How can there still be more questions after everything passed? Still traipsing through flux, start dates, end dates, which sectors do your project fit? And those sectors are defined by Otago Community Trust. So from memory, youth is a big one for them. Manitai is one of those things. So they really want to difference in youth, and so that in one we go for, communities another, and there are yet more. You then have to explain why you chose that sector. It's not good enough to choose it, you have to explain it. And so when I've been talking again and again about that, we've got this thing here, just think of it further. I'm not making this up. They want us to think. They want us to explain our decisions, and that's very important. And then we've got funding pillars that across the different communities. We've got different pillars that support those communities, and this is increased access to opportunities. And so the idea is that we allow more people to do more things, and this aligns with that. Again, asks us to explain why we think that's not good enough just to say that people. This is Minority communities. So there they are. 10% each. No one's going to count this, but it's a cost. But you might be running events for refugees. It's 100% against forward. It might be that simple. But again, it forces you to think, so who is this you're working with and for? Who will get the benefit of what we do? And again, tell us the reason for your selection. It's not good enough to tick the box, and I have to explain it. And what goes on? Remember, this is for a grant for, what was it, 2,500 we got? We had to do all this work to be able to apply for it. And there's no more work than doing an application that fails or that is successful and fails. So we may have not got the money, but we still have to do this. So it's asking us for a financial statement. So earlier on, we said about how we need to be prepared, have a document we want for a financial statement. What's the latest ones in registered charity and society? You can find them online. It's lost your old ones. But it's asking about, did we make a surplus or deficit? This is all publicly available information for charities and public societies. It's probably something if you're a public society here reporting to SAON, because it's a requirement to report to them, but they want to know your background. And so does your constitution require an audit or review? Who knows whether the constitution requires an audit? Does it? Review. Yeah. And because reviews and audits aren't required until you are spending a significant amount of money. So most of us would only need to do it if there was a review. And they're going to look at the numbers up here and tell whether there's no reviews. And in the applicant declaration, so these are all the things we're signing up to. The first one, we're duly authorised to make this application, including this declaration, at the organisation. That one is worth noting, because if you put this in, and then the funder picks up the phone and talks to another board member and says, oh, that's why you put that funding application in, and they say, what funding application? That funding application will not progress. So we need to talk more about it and make sure everyone's aware that this is what the organisations, not just you. Right, so that takes us to the end of that application form. That's an absolutely typical application form. And so we get to what happens after applying. So you should get an acknowledgement of your application, and if it's flux, you'll definitely get acknowledgement. And if you don't get it, you get a call. Just chase that up. Especially with DCC at the moment, because they're not getting all the emails. And the websites down as well. So you've got to Sunday for your waste minimisation applications to allow for that. Right, and if you need more information or clarification, they'll come back to you and will ask. And so you just give them, and it's perfectly normal. You worded it in a way so it's clear they come back. And one recently, which said, we provide guidance on phone purchase. They came back and said, you can't use this funding on phones. Not using it to buy phones, we're identifying phones and coming up with a process for managing buying phones. And so they said, okay, that's fine. But we thought we weren't clear how we clarified. And so then they'll check that eligibility. So all that work that we did at the beginning, they make sure we do that. And so that's one side of it. So are the requirements met? Are you in the right area? Are you constituted? Do they like your constitution? And then they'll check that your project matches the funder's purpose. So there's the kind of have you ticked all the boxes thing. And then there's a how well does this actually align with what we do? And depending on the size of the funder, it's quite likely that there'll be a person who does all the paperwork and presents it to the board. So time to trust board and all the decisions for CMTs won't make the decisions for them, but you're working with the member staff, which presents it to them. And in some circumstances, those staff will suggest what should happen. They might say, suggest decline, or suggest part fund, or suggest fund, or they may just present to the board. So you'll hear if you're fully successful, partially successful, and decline. And then this is the board one. If you get feedback, take it on board. It's going to be useful. If this funder doesn't think you're clear, then write it more clearly to the next one. And it's a useful process. And you can always phone up Matt. And a fairly regular response there is funds were over-accounted. So you and 500 other organisations have put in for $10,000 each. Fund as was that 95% of people get knocked back, and that's just how that will be. And you'll never find out whether you were in the 94th percentile or the. So payments, contracts, delivery, and reporting. So you'll sign an agreement. If they say you're successful, ask you to say, maybe you accept that, sign something, or click a button online to tell them. And then payment would generally come in full into the organisation's bank account, but it may come in stages as you go, or in some circumstances you get it. You spend the money, give the receipt, you receive the money back. And if that is what's happening, you need to think through right at the beginning, do we have enough cash to buy this thing, to pay for this thing? And if you don't, it might be as simple as picking up the fund and saying, actually, are you able to pay that in advance? And will they say yes or no? And then you have to deliver your project as outlined in your agreement and report back on it. That's an easy bit, isn't it? And so here's a letter from Town to Trust to addressed to me. And so this is contribution towards the total project cost of 42. Got to do it within 12 months, and they've just given us the money because we went into flux. Yes, sign, we agreed to everything, give us the money, and they send us a letter. Right, so you've often done your event. If you just skip over, this is very easy to deliver these things. Right back to the funding, which is real work, and we have to report back. And so it's generally called an accountability report. If you are getting stage funding, you might have to do staged accountabilities. That 6 months, you might tell us achieved, well done, thank you, and then on we go. So the agreement between you and the funder will state what kind of reporting of you during and after just like. So if they've asked for the budget, at the end of it, they might say, okay, how did you actually spend the money? So again, this organisation grants from my head because that's what I'm looking at this week. So applied for risk minimization grant last year, paid for some equipment, gave us the money, and then at the end of it, we need to send receipts for how we spent it. So they can see that we had actually bought what it was we intended to do. So receipts, invoices, need the audited accounts. So if it's a big project or a multi-year project, we want to see your accounts. And in your accounts, we want to see that you are credited. We want to see a line there saying we received money from the Town to Trust. And if you can do more than that, I'm sure you'll be very pleased. Do an annual report, add the logo in, say thank you very much. And then when you're doing your accountability, you can say, and we thank you. And then the big difficult bit, outcome reporting. So we thought about it in advance, saying, what difference are we going to make here? And then at the end, this is the difference we made. And it might matter less if you never want to go to that funder again. Or you do want to go to that funder again, You need to think through how you should. And that's where talking to the people who benefit, evidencing it, showing the difference that you made. So did you reach the goal? Number of people, anything that you can measure is wonderful. But telling the story of how the project went with the funding period is fantastic. Outcomes. What is the difference this made? That's what we need to be focusing on. And we want to be transparent. If there were problems in DCC, one of the questions they asked, what didn't go so well? They also asked what went well, but it's a bit like those interview questions, isn't it? What's your biggest failing? You want to think through the answer. You don't want to say this was an absolute disaster from beginning to end. You want to say you had some challenges with this, and that showed us that we need to do this in the future. I want to add that wee bit extra information to show where it came from. And so, every fund proposal will be issues. If they didn't, year 2000, very much, year 2020, very much that complications come in, you have to do these things. And relationship building. Reporting back, remember we talked about that relationship you're forming with the fund, forming a relationship. They're giving you money, you're giving them outcomes, everybody's happy. As long as we meet all the criteria, and this continues that. So most funders won't give you any more money until you've got your accountability. So put in a funding application to tell people to trust this week, and as part of that, I said, have you got any outstanding accountabilities? Very quickly did our accountability involved. Don't have any outstanding accountabilities. And so we want to build that relationship, and this is your chance to say, okay, we went out, we did this, got these fantastic outcomes, we created this change. What next? We want to do more of this. We want to create more change. Or now we've got these trying to this level. We want to take them further. We know you got a chance here to suggest what's coming next, to move to the next funding application. Fed half the children with freedom, so we can say that here. Honest, trustworthiness, capable. Right? We need to ask about that. Why us? Why should we be the ones to deliver? It's because we know what we're doing. We just it's answer. So we need to think about that as we're answering these questions. And so the other next so if you need help with the budgeting, accountability, reporting back, and then you can always get in touch with us through service or available to help us. You can do as well, so you're not needing and so now the scary bit. I think you're taking this, are you?
Oh,
Questions.